earlier in the year or even last year, there were people talking about, $1 million Bitcoin. Shout out to my friend Samson Mao. I love what he's doing on Aqua, but I disagree on his $1 million prediction. At least now, I think it's more likely to happen, let's say, in the early 2030s, maybe 2032, 2033 is more likely, $1 million per Bitcoin. But I think people are a little bit upset in some ways because they feel like, oh, if I had just been in Nvidia, and again, it's easy to cherry pick, right? It's easy to cherry pick and say, well, if I just timed the exact thing and bought that instead of this, and look, I think there's you have to zoom out and understand there are times where Bitcoin gets ahead of itself and gets behind itself. Or if you're looking at like power law, there are times where we're above the line and then we're below the line. So right now we're a little bit below the line in terms of the trend. I think the trend price is maybe like 110, 115-ish in that range. And as we speak now, it's 95K. And I think it's also fair to say with the treasury companies, there was massive hype, right? Halfway through this year, let's say around June-ish, around there, May, June, July, around that time, there was huge hype for all these treasury companies. Some of that has obviously now dissipated. There's a lot of these now trading either at MNAV, at 1x MNAV or below. My reasoning or thinking on that is it is more volatile than Bitcoin itself. Like, I think you've just got to be honest about that. And also, I think it's fair to say there was overhype, right? People were buying. I think the simple answer is people were overpaying on the MNAV, right? They were overpaying at like 5x, 7x, 8x, or even higher MNAV for that company when maybe I see it like there is some premium that's justifiable, but maybe just it wasn't like that much premium justifiable, right? And to be fair, it is partly a sentiment thing. So it's not that the companies themselves, the treasury companies, can control the sentiment for their stock. There was just a lot of hype. Now, I think there were, does that mean every treasury company is going to do well? No, some will succeed, some will fail. But I still believe that there is fundamentally a business model there, which is that can you borrow, cheap fiat or get access to fiat cheaply, let's say 10% or less, and can you buy Bitcoin growing? Currently, on the power law, it's growing about 40% per year, but it is going to taper down. So if we average it for the next 10 years, something like 30% per year, right? I think that's the fundamental business model. And then that's the question. Do you believe there is a premium justifiable for these things? Now, look, that's a question for everybody for themselves to decide, okay? Think about it like this. If you just go and buy... Now, obvious disclaimer, not your keys, not your coins. First and foremost, self-custody Bitcoin. You should always hold Bitcoin first before you even think about dabbling with treasury companies. Just want to say that up front. And again, I will remind everyone, I'm an advisor with Orange, which is a Brazilian treasury company. I am an investor also, so I put in coins there as well. I've not sold a single stock. I'm hodling and I see it as a medium to long-term play. But I'll say it like this. If you just buy... Now, if you are a normie who's not comfortable with self-custody and this person is thinking about buying an ETF like IBIT or FBTC or one of these, you're not getting increased Bitcoin exposure. With these treasury companies, they actually have the ability to try to access cheap equity or cheap debt and try to use that to accumulate more Bitcoin. Now, you have to balance that with the risk of, okay, are they a professional team? Are they competent? Do they know how to fundraise? Do they know, all of these other aspects? Are they taking on custody risk? Which, yes, they are. You have to assess those different risks and blend all of that together and think, okay, what is the premium that I believe is justifiable? Now, for some people, they'll say, no, not even once. Treasury companies, not even once from their perspective. And fair enough. If you just want to hodl Bitcoin or earn and spend Bitcoin, hey, more power to you. No disagreement or objection to you there. I think for other people, they are okay with some level of risk or they're okay with some different slicing, right? So as an example, maybe they're not comfortable with the full volatility of Bitcoin, but they're okay with some kind of stepped down grade, or the way Michael Saylor explains it, it's like an oil refinery giving out different levels of oil or different types of oil. So there are some people who are not comfortable with the full volatility of Bitcoin.
Is this just a different era that we are now living in? And this is also maybe that's why the price kind of moves in a different way?
So, yeah, and I'm sure you saw there was a famous article going around about kind of making this analogy, which I'm sure you saw. It was like Bitcoin is having its IPO moment, right? Now, it's a quasi-loose IPO moment. It's not technically an IPO, but the idea was, look, these early cypherpunks and libertarians who got in early years, they are kind of having their liquidity moment, right? And that's where a bunch of them are kind of dumping and whatever. And probably many of them still believe in Bitcoin, but they're just kind of lightening their stacks a little bit, or maybe they're transitioning some of their stacks into treasury plays or ETF plays so that then they can borrow against it and this, that, and the other. And so I think that's part of it. And of course, there have been these different news articles floating around. As an example, as I'm sure you know, there was one where someone sold like some huge stack of Bitcoin. I think it was like 8,000 or was it 80,000? I think it was 8,000 Bitcoin. Someone was selling like just this massive stack of Bitcoin that, it got absorbed, right? Like we didn't just insta dump 50% off of that, right? Like we went from like 125 down to like, I don't know, 115 or something like that. These were the kind of numbers. And so I think it's a similar thing. We are seeing this new kind of institutional bid, I believe. And that's why you're noticing the drops aren't as much these days. Now, of course, that's not excluding, like, we could see bigger drops, right? I've lived through them, and people should be aware. You can have big drops in Bitcoin, like 80% drawdowns have happened before. You should be at least open to that possibility again. Now, I think it's a lot less likely, to be honest. I think it's a lot less likely nowadays. I think now probably 50 or 60% is probably the most you would realistically see, at a guess, right? But it all kind of depends on how crazy things go. Like if we saw some crazy euphoria, then yeah, maybe we can have another 80% drawdown. But for now, we haven't had a crazy euphoria, right? Like this cycle has just kind of been like kind of grinding up or kind of a move up and then consolidate for a while. Yeah, and I will say, look, people have been fighting internally about lots of things, for a while, right? Now, of course, there was block size wars, but even just kind of there would be kind of low level skirmishing going on all the time, right? Like the coin join implementations, right? Samurai versus Wasabi, and then kind of join market off to the side. There'd be hardware wallets fighting each other. There would be, the like all kinds of different arguments in Bitcoin land. Although now, yes, there's a lot of let's say the online Bitcoin, echo chamber. Yes, there's a lot of argument about knots versus core. But the funny thing is, if you look at, like, I think Alex Thorne tweeted this or posted this recently saying he works with certain institutional, partners and customers, and many of them were either pro core or not really, caring about this debate, or either not knowing or not caring about this debate. So I think there are times where, as a online echo chamber, people sort of spiral off into their own little purity spirals, and they're kind of talking about things that they think are so relevant, or they think they are the most relevant faction within Bitcoin. But actually, there's like a lot of the big money and other players who don't really care about that, because it's maybe not that interesting to them. That's, so be it. But I think there are times where, yeah, like people sort of lose perspective because they think everyone around them has the same view. So other people outside their little circles also have the same view, but it's just not accurate.
I was just in Amsterdam. I actually just came back 2 days ago from Bitcoin Amsterdam, and I realized afterwards that nobody talked about it.
Yeah.
I had so many conversations. It's all like we never talk about the price. Like it's like I love being on Bitcoin conferences because it gets so great conversations, and it's rarely about the price, even when the price, as in those conference, went down. But the block size war was not even close to be a small discussion. In Bulgaria, like a month ago in October, it was a discussion on and off stage also. It's like also sometimes there's a difference between on and off stage. But I don't know, it seems like the peak of the discussion seems a little bit over, but maybe I'm wrong. Let's see what happens.
If it's fine for you to run whatever filters you want on your node, but to try to control what other people do on their node, that's the quote unquote authoritarian part in his view. I think it's just a bit of a clumsy wording though. But I think that's probably the more steelman point that he was trying to make, which is that, look, if I like vanilla ice cream and you like chocolate ice cream, we can both eat our separate ice creams. But in the case of the filter camp, it's sort of like they sort of they believe that no, it's like you need to eat vanilla ice cream as well. They can't just I eat vanilla, you eat chocolate. It's not like that, right? Now they would argue no, that's because you're defending the monetary, aspect or nature of the network instead of turning it into a shitcoin and spam network or whatever. I just think there's different arguments there on like how much is actually possible, right? Because in theory, I mean, sure, if I could just press a button and have only monetary data on the Bitcoin network, yeah, I would press that button right now. But unfortunately, no such button exists. And I don't think, idealistically chasing that goal is going to help us overall when there are these other real world things to contend with. Things like, okay, what does it mean for block propagation? What does it mean for these other? What does it mean for monetary scripting capabilities? What does it mean for these other elements of Bitcoin? What does it mean for the censorship resistance of Bitcoin?
It's so interesting because it's only on Twitter and it's only sometimes when I make those posts, because I always say run node, like run a node, not nodes. It's sometimes hard to distinguish just saying it out loud, but do run a node. And I don't even care which one, but I care that you study them and make your own assessment of what you want to run. And I say that because I don't want a bunch of people running core or a bunch of people running nodes just because I say so. I rather have a bunch of people operating a node and actually knowing what they are doing. Because I do think if you are just a voice in Bitcoin that just does what some influencer says, you don't really have a voice or a vote in the network. And so I always argue for having people in the network that actually think what they want from their node. And that kind of stance got me attacked a lot because people say like, oh, like you're just afraid to make a stance. And I think in the past, I've made many different stands that kind of prove that wrong. But anyways, I really think it's very important that we have a lot more nodes running, and especially nodes that are operated by people that actually think and are economically nodes and use nodes that are actually connected to wallets and actually do something. Now, every node is great. Like every one that is like having more nodes in general, I think is positive. But I would rather have more nodes that actually do something with it and are actually an active participant of the network. And this is a hard stance because it was like, oh, like you're just defending. Like, no, I just want you to run a node and think for yourself which integration. And if you do that, I'm happy. And also, if we all have critical thinking people that run nodes, then the best integration ultimately will win, whichever you think this is. But if you're on the right side and we all think critically about like what is the best integration, the best integration ultimately will win. Or maybe it's fair to have 2 or 3 integrations running side by side and not one has to have 100%. Maybe we can have 40, 20% with like different integrations. I don't know. The first thing that every Bitcoiner does, and the most important activity that every Bitcoiner keeps on doing, is buying Bitcoin. And I personally use Relay to buy and sometimes also spend or sell my Bitcoin. And there are 2 main reasons why I do so. The first one is it's Bitcoin only. They do not do any shit coins. They do not do any cryptos, any stocks, or anything else. This is a tool, an app that is fully focused only and solely on Bitcoin. The second one is self-custody. They give you the keys to your Bitcoin the moment you buy them. You never give them the control over your Bitcoin, and you don't have to trust them because you can verify that you and only you have the keys to your Bitcoin. There's no third-party risk. There's no freezing of your assets. There's no rug pulling. There's nothing of that. Download Relay, the app, on your phone, or go to relay.app on your browser and use code Robin to save fees and get cheaper Bitcoin. I want to tell you about something very special to me. It's called micro seed. If you hold your Bitcoin in self-custody, and you should, you know how critical it is to secure your seed phrase. You should not have them on paper. You should not have them on anything else than titanium. With micro seed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a one 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups because MicroSeed is not selling the washer. MicroSeed is selling the device that stamps the washer. So you get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today. And you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io.